Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the Derate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Here at the DTH podcast, we don't just talk about division, anger, and outrage. We focus on solutions, on healing, on finding common ground in a world that so often feels fractured. Today, I have the privilege of sitting down with someone who understands that journey firsthand. Brandon Bishop is not just an advocate for emotional intelligence, he's a disruptor, a visionary, and the founder of TrueEQ, a movement dedicated to redefining human connection. Brandon's life has been shaped by trauma, by emotional isolation, and by a society that often values status over substance. But instead of letting that define him, he's used it as fuel to build a platform that challenges the very systems that keep us disconnected. His story is raw. Raised in an emotionally barren home, perfectionism became his survival mechanism. But over time, he saw through the rigid ideologies, whether religious, corporate, or social, that prioritize control over compassion. And that realization led him to a new mission, to help others break free, reclaim their worth, and rebuild relationships rooted in self-awareness, resilience, and radical authenticity. Through TrueEQ, Brandon is creating something different, an intentional social network that isn't about algorithms, clout, or ego, but real human connection. Brandon believes that emotional intelligence is the key to personal growth, meaningful relationships, and ultimately a better society. And he's not just talking about it, he's doing something about it. Building a space for those who are willing to step beyond the noise, lean into vulnerability, and rewrite the rules of their connection. So today, my friends, we're diving deep into trauma, resilience, and what it means to break that cycle, to stop carrying the weight of our past and start forging a future built on empathy, courage, and self-discovery. Now, I'm going to warn you, friends, this is probably not an episode that you want to listen to with the kids in the car because there is a few touchy subjects in here that are probably not meant for little ears. But I tell you what, it's an episode that you do not want to miss. So important. So with that, I'm excited to welcome my new friend, Brandon Bishop. Here we go. Brandon Bishop, thank you so much for joining me here on the Derate the Hate podcast, man. It's good to see you today.
Thanks for having me, Wilk. I'm glad to be a guest.
So glad to have you, Brandon. So I was looking into this TrueEQ thing that you have going on, Brandon, and people who have listened to the Derate the Hate podcast before or seen me speak know one of the things that I talk about is emotional intelligence. And the emotional intelligence, obviously, or maybe for some people, or not so obviously, EQ is this thing, you know, how we interact with others, how we interact, in my way of thinking, how we interact with things that maybe in our control and are outside of our control. But a big part of it for me, Brandon, is, and like I said, listeners from the Derate the Hate podcast know, is talking about how we deal with things outside of our control. I know for you, by looking at your website, you know, you talk about emotional intelligence is a skill and it is the cornerstone of meaningful relationships. So that's where I want to start, Brandon, is first of all, how did you become, I guess, an expert in the field of emotional intelligence? What
Mhm.
drove you as an individual to take this thing on as your thing? And then I want to hear about what TrueEQ is. More importantly, I want the DTH listeners to find out what TrueEQ is. But let's start with, where did you find yourself getting involved in this emotional intelligence space?
Hey, yeah, thanks for asking me. That's a good question. I do want to say, though, I appreciate being called an expert. I would not define myself as an expert. And I would say that I'm more of an advocate. I understand through lived experience how important emotional intelligence is. So a lot of people, when they're looking to an expert, they're looking for somebody who has those PhDs behind their name, who've actually studied it and done stuff like that. I've got a master's degree in secondary education. I was a chemistry teacher. But the emotional intelligence, why it's so important to me, is because my lived experience has not only required me to develop it, but it's also, I think, been the major pain point. People not having it has been the major pain point in my life.
Right.
And if you think it's helpful to your audience, I could talk a little bit about my history and probably the big things that happened that got me to where I'm at today.
Well, by all means, do. I mean, that's one of the things I love doing with my guests on this podcast, Brandon, is what was your journey to where you are today? I mean, I talk a lot about my own journey, about my
Mm-hmm.
own pain, the things that I did, and I want to bring that to the DTH listeners, because that genuine vulnerability helps others
Mm-hmm.
on their journey. And that's what I want to do with this podcast. So yeah, please do. Tell me, what was
Yeah.
what was the genesis of this for you?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity for real because I've spent most of my life being ashamed. And being ashamed of my family circumstances, it kept me pretty lonely. But just to give you, and kind of a need to fill that void is part of the story behind why I, created the social network TrueEQ. But both of my parents were 15 when I was born. My mom was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and I really didn't know if she was my mom or my sister. Her parents raised me,
Really?
but she was like, there sometimes. I occasionally would see her. I remember asking her when I was around 5 or 6, "Are you my mom or are you my sister?" I just really wasn't sure. But she was spending her life drinking and doing drugs, and my dad didn't have much to do with me at all because my grandfather kind of gave him an ultimatum and said, you need to step up, and if you don't step up now, he's talking to a 15-year-old, then you're not welcome around here. So he did what I think a lot of 15-year-old boys would do and be like, yeah, I'm not ready for that.
I'm out. Yeah.
So yeah, so my life started in I was kind of like my grandparents' seventh child. My mom was their sixth, their youngest, and then they basically had me and they raised me, and I moved in with my mom when she got out of prison. But I would say I've always been um, I've always been very, and probably I had to learn this from an early age. So from before I can really remember, I've had to be really in tune and be pretty aware of what's going on around me just to keep me safe. Wilk, my earliest memories are from being 3 years old, waking up in my neighbor's lap with his hand down my pants. Like, you asked me what my earliest memory is of my life, that is it, like while I was still in diapers. So, that was an extremely traumatic experience to me. It was the first time I'd ever really had those feelings that I felt. I mean, first of all, I woke up and I was shocked. I was completely shocked. I was 3 years old and I pretended like I didn't notice. So I like slowly woke up just to I didn't want to make him angry or anything like that. So I just slowly woke up and like, oh, I'm ready to go home. And as soon as as soon as my feet hit the dirt, I was running, I was bawling. And I remember him like following me out of his door, being like, "Don't you tell anybody." So I ran to our property. My aunt and my cousins had a trailer, and then I lived in a dilapidated house right next door, and we had an old fishing boat in the front yard, and that's where my little 3-year-old self went. I ran into that fishing boat, couldn't see anything. It was dark. There's probably spider webs, and I bawled my eyes out, like uncontrollably sobbing. I could not comprehend what had just happened to me. I just knew it didn't feel good. It didn't feel right. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And after I kind of like calmed down a little bit, I went to the back, where my grandma, to the back door, the kitchen where my grandmother was, doing dishes. And I told her what happened immediately. And I remember she looked off into the window. She dropped her hands. And I just asked her, Granny, why did he do it? Granny, why did he do it? And she said, he's sick, Brandon, he's sick. And that's the last we heard about it. We never talked about it again. I don't know that anybody really knew. I know my grandfather didn't know. I have this suspicion that that man had probably had his hand in a lot of my aunts and uncles' pants as they were growing up, and nothing was ever said or done about it. I kind of believe that. I mean, part of the reason my mom had such a rough start was because she told me this after I, was older, of course. But, people were always like, well, maybe not so much anymore, but back when, she was born in 1967, when she started being promiscuous and doing drugs and alcohol at, 14, 15, she became the black sheep immediately. Nobody even wondered what the hell was going on. It wasn't until she was an adult, until after she'd gotten out of prison and she had lost all credibility with her brothers and her sisters, that she finally said, yeah, my brother that you guys love so much, that's like the family hero that was the best at baseball and cut everybody's grass. Yeah, he crawled in bed with me every night and made me touch him. And he forced himself onto me. So my mom had that in her soul. And then like her family wouldn't believe her. Like she had lost all credibility at that point. Got pregnant with me, addicted to drugs and alcohol, prison. So, so it was her, then it was me, and who else I don't know in the family that things like that happen to. But these are the generational curses that whether TrueEQ, which we'll talk about in a second, is successful or not, I'm successful despite TrueEQ because I'm not passing down the trauma and I'm not carrying that trauma on my shoulders. And this is something I actually had to tell my mom recently because she, has had a very hard time coping her entire life. She's still not well, Wilk. She's still, she still suffers. But I shared with her something that I was able to come to terms with, and that's nothing that has been said or done to me has anything to do with me. Yeah. Whether it's something bad or even if it's a compliment, those are all projections of somebody else's values. And you got to let the things that are bad, sometimes if they're really bad, you need to process them, but then eventually you just have to know, that's not about me. That's about that person.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hard to get there, but once you do, it's pretty freeing. So anyway, that just sort of like, my mom got out of prison. I moved in with my mom, and then, life was pretty rough then. She was 22. I was 8. She was 22. She married a 42-year-old Vietnam vet. And I learned a lot from him. He was my new stepdad. But when I moved in with them, they were both complete strangers to me. I had lived with my grandparents, my mom barely ever being there. And I moved in with them from a very country, part of Alabama, Talladega, Alabama. And we were living right by the highway on a trailer. And all day long, there were like 18-wheelers going up and down the road in my backyard. I couldn't even go outside. It was torture for me. And then he was addicted to crack. And my mom at that point had gotten sober and clean, and she wanted to be a housewife. And she was doing some housework. And one day she didn't know he was a drug addict, but she found a bag of crack and stuffed into the toe of one of his dress shoes. He was a car salesman. And she decided that she was going to hide it. And she hid it. And I don't know how many days it took for him to go looking for it. But when he went looking for it, she wouldn't tell him where it was. And that was like my first experience witnessing extremely violent domestic abuse. Yeah. I mean, that day, my mom, I saw her get slung to the ground by her ponytail, dragged across the kitchen floor, picked up by her throat, her head slung, like crashed through a china cabinet, breaking all the glass and all the dishes. And that was the next 4 years, basically, because my mom just wouldn't, she was really committed to helping him break his habits, but she had no emotional intelligence at all. Right. She had spent most of her life trying to cope with the horrible stuff that had been done to her.
From her past already.
Yeah. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know how to be a supportive partner, and she didn't know she married, somebody who had a bad drug problem and he was an alcoholic. So I spent a lot of my life seeing a lot, right? That taught me to be very aware. So I became socially aware before I was ever self-aware. So emotional intelligence, you probably know, has got 4 pillars they talk about. It's got 2 types of awareness, and it's got 2 types of management. You've got self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. And you can be strong in one and not the others, or weak in one and strong in the rest. But my social awareness was heightened from a very, very, very early age. And I attribute it to me waking up from my sleep, having a grown man's hand down my pants, who, get this, Wilk, and this is what I like to say. And I speak this loud when I can, because I think it's very important. And we can see it, but nobody talks about it enough. This was a straight man, right? Mm-hmm. Clearly he was a pedophile. But in the everyday walk of life, he was a widow, right? He took care of his disabled daughter. He went fishing. He went hunting. He did all these things that masculine men do, right?
Yeah.
So I say that because, there's a lot of people like him, and I saw it in the South growing up, that I went to high school with a guy who was gay, and he was very effeminate, and he would get a lot of criticism and stuff like that for being that way. I'm like, guess what? That's real funny to me that all these masculine, because to me, my experience is that guy never did anything to me or anybody who acted like him. It's that neighbor. And, stuff like that, I think is important, because we got to break down these stereotypes. Because if we hold up these stupid ass stereotypes, we will never believe the, horrendous things that people do behind closed doors and what their secret thoughts are. And people put on masks, man. That's another thing about emotional intelligence. Once you have enough time to practice it or develop it, it can protect you in a lot of ways. That social awareness, like if you could be socially aware, I'm very intuitive. Like it doesn't take me long to suss somebody out really, really quickly if they're a safe person or not.
Sure.
But I would say, the next thing I had to do was develop self-awareness, because I really do think it's the cornerstone for the rest of them. I got a head start in the social awareness piece, but I wasn't able to have any good relationships, because you can't really form good relationships unless you're self-aware.
Yeah.
But then, I ended up, crazy life with my mom. They were married for 4 years. We got a trailer in Mumford, Alabama, roach-infested trailer. And I was basically taking care of my sister at that point. And my mom, who had been a stay-at-home mom for those 4 years that she was with my stepdad, she became a waitress at a truck stop. And she was working the night shifts. So she would work at night and she'd sleep all day. And then, I don't want to tell too much of her story, but when money got tight, she did what she needed to do and what she felt like she could to make ends meet. So I would get home, from school and there'd be, the aftermath of the shit that went down, for her to survive. Right. So that was like my adolescence. And then I ended up joining a cult when I was 16. Like I wanted so desperately to have like stability in my life.
Right.
And I actually, growing up through all that stuff, I only ever wanted to like be a good kid and do the right thing. Like kids who went to school with me, man, they would have never, ever known what was going home. I made sure of it. Like I wouldn't even allow it. I wouldn't let people come over. I didn't talk to anybody. I was very, very, very ashamed. I made sure my clothes were always clean, and anything I could do just to look normal. I did. And
just to cover up the trauma from home.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it was embarrassing.
Well, yeah, it's an embarrassment. It's those kind of things. I've had several conversations with others, with trauma at home and things in their past, brand, that they, this is obviously a very horrific, genesis to, your building of EQ and coming to a point where you've put together a true EQ, and I don't want to kind of step on that story to get to where we're going here.
I can make it quick, I can make it quick so we can get to it.
Yeah, we've established that there's an ugly, traumatic past. Your home life, your formative years, Brandon, are completely jacked up with just a whole bunch of ugly, a whole bunch of stuff that's outside of
I learned a lot. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I also know that I learned a lot.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's right. I one of the things that I've established over the course of my life and taken away from my life, and my life, which is nowhere near as my background, my past, my history is nowhere as traumatic as yours. But what I do know is those people who can learn from the ugly that's in their past, mm-hmm. and then no matter who we are, it's human nature in many ways to look for ways to blame ourselves for the things within our past or the things that we've done, and some people get stuck in that cycle of self-blame. They lose all their self-worth. They don't know where they're going or how to get out of where they're at or where they've been. They don't know the power of forgiveness and being able to move on, and the fact that forgiveness is for us and not necessarily for the other person. Mm-hmm. All of these different things, Brandon. So the ugly within your past and the traumatic genesis of your story, you've obviously become someone who has learned from the mistakes of others, the evil from others, the ugliness from your past, all those things that are outside of your control. And you've taken them and truly become somebody who's embodied. Now, like you said, you're not an expert, but you're an advocate. And I like the way you phrase that. You've become an advocate for the concept of emotional intelligence. Talk to me then about how you've taken the trauma from your past, which is wholly established already within our conversation. You've taken the trauma from your past. You've taken what that has done to you as a person, but then you have learned to embody and advocate for the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence and work through that and become something that you probably didn't expect yourself to be.
Yeah. It happened slowly. Like, these things don't happen overnight. So it was a gradual process of me questioning a lot, like thinking a lot about why me? I was angry for a long time, Will. Honestly, I was really angry. So I had to get past the angry. I didn't even know I was angry until I was posting some content for YouTube, and my buddy said, "Well, you look really angry." I was like, "I do?" He's like, "Yeah, it comes off angry." I'm like, "Wow, I guess I am angry." So there are a lot of things I had to overcome. I would say the turning point, though, was when I realized it was this slow process of sort of detaching from that little boy who lived all those experiences, and me looking at him not as me, because I'm not that person anymore. I have those memories. I know what that little boy went through, but I used it to teach me about the world and about people and about how powerful people will take advantage of those with less power, that people will lie to get what they want, that people will cheat and they will steal. I just used it as this foundation for teaching me about this crazy world that we live in. And I was like, you know what? I've been pretty lonely, and I've desperately wanted connection my whole life. But I'm tired of toxic relationships because I'm so needy in that way, and I want like this companionship. I'm the like perfect candidate for a narcissist because I open up quick, eager to please and be your friend and and narcissists eat it up. And I was like, God damn it, this is just exhausting. So TrueEQ is this social network where people are matched up based on their basically the quiz results that they take on onboarding that test their emotional intelligence. because I was like, maybe this is the way I can connect with people who, not only respect emotional intelligence, but also have self-respect. They're not envious. They can support you without jealousy. They can, not there to manipulate you or to use you. So that's the concept behind TrueEQ. And it matches people up based on scores of an emotional intelligence test. Like other platforms will match you up based on friends of friends or where you live or what industry you work in. This is matching people up based on their interest and their emotional intelligence, which to me is the seedbed for a safe place to make real friends.
One of the things that stood out to me, like I said right away, I think I mentioned it right at the beginning of our conversation, Brandon, is you talk about emotional intelligence being the cornerstone of meaningful relationships. Meaningful relationships are things that I believe are one of these things that so many people are seeking today, but don't feel that they can find, especially in the age of the internet and things like that. I know this is an app, and this is is it an app now, or it's becoming an app?
No, you can get it in the App Store. It's a social networking site, so you can access it from your desktop, but just for convenience, I made it into an app. You can download it.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of people do their interpersonal communication, interpersonal relationships now online. One of the things, and this is a question that I have for you, is do you envision in some way that this will actually lead to true in-person interpersonal communication and relationships for people? Because I think that's one of the things that's lacking today. I mean, I know that based on our conversation so far, you're somebody who had a longing for strong, meaningful relationships, and I think a lot of people do find their relationships nowadays online. But do you envision somehow that this will lead to like in-person communication and in-person relationships as well? Because I think that's one of the things that the I guess the popularity of online ecosystems and things have done is they've transferred that true in-person interpersonal relationship to something that's while important, but it's online, so in my opinion is not the same thing. Do you envision that as part of this down the road, Brandon?
Well, let me first acknowledge it. Yeah, I think all the social networking sites and technology has played a part in the isolation of humans. We're social creatures. I think we thrive. Of course, we thrive when we're physically together. I don't envision this app being like a meetup or anything like that where people will meet in person. However, I am developing workshops. My idea is for TrueEQ to become the next wave or the next generation's version of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People workshops they do in corporate America, or the Crucial Conversations workshops, or the Love 'em or Lose 'em workshops. Like TrueEQ will take that space. So in that way, it'll train people in person and then help people, educators, first responders, help them develop skills in their real life. But no, I don't have this app set up. I mean, I could turn it on in like a blink of an eye. I could have it set up where the distance, right? We could use location GPS with your phone to say, oh, this person's this many miles away from you. No, that's not the goal. I want people to be able to connect from everywhere. Right now it's in Canada and the USA. And for me, I understand the physical side, but I also feel like there's no place for safe conversations either. I mean, most of the platforms anymore are just ads. Yeah. Or it's this curated version of yourself that you want people to see. It's not who you really are. So my thing is I want a place where I can be really me and a safe place so that I know that, people aren't there you can't really you can post pictures in TrueEQ, but it's so inconvenient and you can't make it the post. It's just not going to be an ego-driven place, which is one of my hurdles. I mean, I do need more users. I think we only have like 50 users. Where I'm brand new. I just launched this December of 2024, and I'm working with some content creators now. But it's not ego-driven. Everybody wants that ego-driven everybody wants to be able to post pictures of where they went to dinner, where they went on vacation.
Right.
People love that shit.
Yeah.
So TrueEQ is not going to do it for them, right?
Nice.
It just won't.
Okay.
And I don't want to compete.
No, that's good. Well, and I mean, I like that. And I like what you're doing there, in that as long as people know up front that this is what it is. It's not another one of these ego-driven sites. I like the idea, though, Brandon, that you're trying to help people build. This is one of those things, and I think in emotional intelligence, another thing that I like that you said on your site is it's a skill, or it's a skill set. It's something that we can build. And when I think of building upon a skill set, I think of muscle memory. Muscle memory, for the brain, for the heart, for the mind, for the soul, for emotional intelligence, is every bit as important as anything else. And while this may not be an app that's going to help people meet up and help them, or help to facilitate some kind of in-person meeting or interpersonal communication, what it does is it helps people, in my mind's eye anyway, it can help people work on that muscle memory, work on the building of their mind, their body, their soul, and how they use emotional intelligence to better facilitate those conversations when they do happen in a true interpersonal, in-person fashion. I mean,
it's digital practice. It's digital practice. And you're practicing with real people. I mean, we've got some great conversations going on there right now. I mean, we've got people talking about like spousal arguments, how do you how to react to certain situations. I mean, there's all kinds of things like, anybody who's been married for a really long amount of time, right? In order to make it, if you're going to be honest and stay married, God, you're going to have some very difficult conversations. So TrueEQ is this place where, hey, I want to talk about this. I don't know how to even approach it. And you've got this whole group of people there. They're like, hey, wait, I got you. This, it's beautiful, really.
Yeah. No, I like that, because those who suffer from lack of training or lack of TrueEQ or true emotional intelligence, to have a digital training ground that they can use to help build those muscles or better handle those situations is great. I mean, I am somebody, Brandon, who for a very long time was very, very angry myself. Like I said, the genesis of my anger and the story of my past, while many would call it tragic, was not nearly as tragic as yours. And there's going to be a large spectrum of people who have all kinds of different stories, right? We don't know the storms that people have been through, the storms that people are in, or the storms that people are fixing to get into. But but if we can, or we can have a digital training ground, a mock-up version of things that have happened, may happen, will happen, and that somehow helps us to be better at dealing with those relationships and dealing with situations, especially those situations that are outside of our control. So much of what I talk about is how we react to those situations that are out of our control. Being able to positively and proactively deal with all the stuff that's out of our control, I think is hugely important in our lives, and the what we can do to positively contribute to the world around us. Brandon, so I'm definitely going to encourage people, the DTH listeners, check out this TrueEQ.app to see what what's going on here. Become part of this digital training ground to build a stronger emotional intelligence muscle, so to speak.
No,
Brandon,
I appreciate
I'll
it.
give you the final word here. Let's go ahead and tell me what you want the DTH listeners to take away from this conversation, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, well, appreciate you, Wilk. I like what you're doing. I like the concept behind Derate the Hate, and I appreciate you for giving me a platform to speak about TrueEQ. Right now, we're looking for beta users. So at this point, I need about 500 beta users. I'm at 50. I've got a ways to go, but it's those beta users that are basically going to tell me, hey, this is what this is what you can do to improve it, or I noticed this, could it be that? I mean, a beta user group of people are going to be helping me figure out how to really make this app stand out and work for people, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So if people want to be part of the beta users, just know that I accept all feedback, and I appreciate anybody on the app who is all about emotional intelligence, support, and positivity. I think the worst thing anybody could be on that app is somebody who's a jealous person or an envious person. Like if you're jealous of the person down the street, who got something or went on a fancy vacation or lives in a nicer house, yeah, that's not the energy for TrueEQ.
And envy is one of the 7 deadly sins for a reason. I mean,
it's meant to be a supportive place. So if that's the kind of place you like, then we want everybody to feel welcome there.
Yeah, envy is an ugly thing. So, I appreciate that you welcome the feedback. I mean, listening, especially when you're trying to build something great. All good things start with the ability to listen. Brandon, it's been a great conversation. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate the things that you're doing. This is another one of those stories of pain to perseverance, and I appreciate that a lot. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Wilt.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.